Hi, everybody. Today I am here with Josh and Greg, and we are going to talk a little bit about this loneliness trend that's growing and the role AI plays in both alleviating it and exasperating it. So first, I want to introduce yourselves.
Yeah,
Josh?
certainly. So I'm Josh Thomas. I'm on the tech team here in the worship arts realm, and I normally am behind the cameras on these types of things. So this is kind of fun to be on this side
Thanks for being here
today. Thanks for having me.
For sure. And I'm Greg Pietro, and I am on the tech team of a large software company. So we use our software to build solutions for customers. It's traditionally called digital transformation, where we can use technology to help businesses be more efficient. And one of the ways we do that is through generative AI. And I think in the next 5 years, it might be the way we make companies efficient. Okay. So it's growing fast. It's a very, very quickly growing industry.
Right. So. With no signs of slowing down.
With no signs of speeding up.
Yeah.
Speeding up, yes.
That's awesome. Cool. So I want to kind of talk about loneliness for a second, because it's going to give segue to why we're talking about and bringing AI into this conversation. And I was just thinking about it, and biblically in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18 is where God proclaims it's not good for man to be alone. So we know that community and relationship and loneliness is not God's plan for us. We're kind of talking a little bit about what this looks like in our lives. Do you want to speak to that a little bit, Josh?
Yeah, because I think we're at a weird part in human history right now where, especially coming out of COVID, where like our traditional structures of community and of friendships kind of got a little swirled up, mixed up, broken to some degree.
Right.
And I think organizations are, maybe with a good heart, trying to combat this problem of what is the perceived problem of big-time loneliness that's happened as there. But also maybe with a little bit of like, oh, wait a minute, there's an opportunity here for a tool for our product to fill the gap, whereas in the past, maybe actual human relationships and community were that solution to that problem.
Right.
So maybe they're trying to edge in a little bit and get the foot in the door and see what's out there.
I think remote work was a big aspect of that. Sure. Did you see that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Being remote, even with technology like Teams and Zoom and having video, it's really not the same as being in person, right? See people's facial expressions when you talk, their body language, having side conversations outside of the meeting. It's a lot different. I personally like to be in person. I don't like remote meetings, because it's just less personal for me.
Yeah.
And I did think it increased our loneliness, because, we get on those meetings, we're having conversations with people, but it's a very strict conversation, not a lot of personal interaction, more business interaction, and then you're off, and then you're alone in your house doing your own thing. And there's no water cooler conversations unless you have a dog. I talk to my dog a lot. I think it did hurt us in 2020, and I understand the usefulness of remote work, but 100% remote work, I think, sort of lends itself to loneliness.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. All right. Would you like to speak to some of the positive things we've seen in kind of combating loneliness using AI to help?
Yeah, sure. So I think what is interesting in how quickly people have adapted to what's there and what's around. I think we can think of the commercials that are on TV right now that are like, oh, Matthew McConaughey's sitting out in the restaurant in the rain. My AI didn't know that I didn't like this food.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, like maybe that's a good thing that you're not like necessarily wasting time and resources and energies into like, oh, I don't know, oops, so that was a bad experience out to there. And the speed at which things can be accomplished is a very good thing at times. And you go, okay, wait, when it's funny to see the little chatbots kind of like recognize that have called each other on a phone call, and then at a moment they just go like, oh wait, we're both bots. not in English, and the whole gigantic data transfer happens right there. You're like, oh wait, that would have been a half an hour phone call, and now it's just boom, done. Right. So things like going through some like medical record stuff. You're like, oh my gosh, how can I? For me to call and say, where is this record? Can I get a copy of this? Can I have it? Instead of being just like, bink, bink on the website with my login here, download, send out, So you're like, that's extraordinarily helpful. That's great. Like no one's ever going to say like, oh no, we should go back to that old lady pulling a paper drawer out. Oh, Alice isn't here today. You're gonna have to wait 4 days to get that. Right? Yeah. So
Speaking my language.
I love it to use in my life like a reservation. I don't make reservations anymore. I say, hey, call. But sometimes you have to call. You can't do it online, and AI will do it for me. Call and give me a confirmation. Oh we got your reservation at 6:30. I'm like, that's great because I would have spent 30 minutes on the phone waiting for it.
This is great because this is exactly where generative AI is going. So there are multiple things that we're going to see in the future, but one of them is what we call agentic AI, where we're going to give AIs agency. And that is sort of like going to be your personal assistant. So let's say you're married and you have an anniversary coming up. Well, it knows a little bit about you and your spouse. It knows that you like particular foods. It knows you don't like particular foods. It knows the type of flowers you like. It knows the type of music you like. So you can eventually, we'll be able to have that assistant to say, hey, my anniversary's coming up. Can you help set up something romantic for me and my wife? And it'll build a music playlist for you, music that was at your wedding. And it knows you like red roses, so it'll go to the florist, get red roses. So basically, it's going to make your husband look like a hero. Right? Take it to your favorite restaurant, and it's going to arrange all that. And I think the great thing about that, I think Josh touched on this, is that it's going to remove some of the toil from our lives, right? Sure. And that's what I do from a business perspective, is we're trying to remove toil from workers, right? Because there's a lot of busyness. I mean, for me to schedule a meeting and try to arrange customers and internal people all to get in the same room, in the same conversation with everybody's busy schedule, it's nearly impossible. Yeah. It takes me hours and hours of work just to get everybody together. AI in the future is really going to help do that. It's going to manage this. I'm going to say, hey, we need a schedule with these people and talk about this topic. It's going to go out. It's going to arrange those people. It's going to manage all our schedules. It's going to get us in a room together. And then it's going to go pull information from previous emails and previous things that we've done, build an agenda for us, and prep us for the meeting. It'll wake you up in the morning saying, hey, Greg, by the way, you have a meeting with this customer today. Here's the details of the meeting. Here's the agenda, and here's what you know to be prepared.
Right.
So these are like what is coming and what are some of the good things. Yeah. Because, there are some bad things with generative AI, but these are some of the things that are really positive.
Yeah. Cool. And I think when we think about some of the bad things, we talked about a lot of the good things. I think when I think about it, it becomes when we think it is more personal than what it is, that it's relational. Sure. And I think that's when we can kind of get in that slippery slope of when it becomes bad and we're trying to replace it for intimate relationships that we're meant to have human interaction. Have you seen that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's weird. As date of recording right here in March of 2025, there was a super cool, what was science fiction movie about like a decade ago with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. Her was the name. It's amazing, and it had that like, okay, here's a lonely guy. He's real shy. He's not sure what the proper way to talk to women is, right there. And in that near future, this operating system, he starts to like date this operating system. And I'm watching this movie and I'm like, this is amazing. I was like, all the things that this operating system does. She overnight she wakes up and says, he was a greeting card writer, because that was his job. She was like, I've assembled your most popular greeting cards and put them in a book, and it's for sale now. And he's like, wow, thanks. And that's that type of stuff. But as movies tend to do, there has to be some like drop off, and it becomes very clear very quickly how like the expectation of what this machine does for him it goes out of the way of what it really can do. Right. And his attachment becomes clearly a disorder to what's there. Yeah. And the ways that the AI tries to solve it for him are very clever and interesting, but it's just like, it hits reality at some point, where that is up to there.
That's my next question for you. So do you think AI can create genuine connection or just simulate it?
I think go back to the Bible verse. When you're talking to AI, you are alone. Like, what is on the other end is complex mathematics and very sophisticated computer architectures. And while it's very good, and when we train these models, I mean, we're taking a lot of data. So think about the Library of Congress plus, half the internet. Right? And what it's really doing is trying to understand relation and understand relationship between words and extract meaning from it. But at the end of the day, it's very sophisticated mathematics that are understanding what you're saying when you prompt it, when you ask it a question, and generating the response back when it's decoded. So you are alone. I mean, these are unfeeling machines, and any empathy they show towards you, any feeling they show to you, it's all simulated based on how it was trained and how it was fine-tuned. So you have to be really careful, because when you invited me to this conversation, I was like, I've never actually thought of generative AI as a companion. It's always like my servant. Like, hey, I need you to do this. I need this information. This is the problem I'm trying to solve. Help me with this. But I've never felt a personal connection with it, I think is the way to put it. And I think there's danger in that. I think there is danger in that, because it's not a real person. It does a very good job at simulating, but it's not real.
And I think part of this was in the movie very clearly, and I think it's easy for people to do when they are in a place of extraordinary loneliness type of there. Anything is better than nothing. And so having a quote unquote partner to travel with you in your life, but at the same time, this is a product that you're receiving, and a product isn't necessarily going to challenge your beliefs, and you have to think of the other side. I'm giving it this information because it's going to be data mining my life. So when you ask it, we were saying earlier, what restaurant should I take my wife to on an anniversary? What answer are you getting from? Is it based on her, or is it based on how much that restaurant has paid that system to plant their sponsored ad? And
there's potential for that. Sure, there's potential for that.
Where that opens up, right? And you go, oh, okay, great, right, so there. And I saw something odd online of saying, okay, this is like a 18, 19-year-old guy who's admitting on Instagram, he's like, I can't, like I don't make a decision. Like, I ask ChatGPT what is the best, and you're like, okay, well, there's some of that. Like, your friends are just asking, like, hey, where should we go eat? You're like, well, wait a minute, let me ask. I don't want to get this wrong. And so, and then you're like, well, wait a minute, in that kind of conversation, is there a wrong and right? Like, or is there the fun of this is being messy with each other. The fun is getting it wrong sometimes. The relationships grow when things aren't perfect. Through challenges you grow with people, through it, and the robot is going to promise in fantasy land perfection, ever there, and you're gonna maybe even the problem is because of that fantasy you're going to expect that then from all interactions that you have with other people and humans. And
I think you bring up a really good point, because up until this point, and I'm not saying this is going to be the future, but up until this point, generative AI is really bad at long-term memory. So if we have a relationship and, I know you have a child and that child has interests, right? And, we leave here and, maybe in 3 weeks I see you in church and it's like, oh, how's your boy doing? Generative AI is really bad at that. It has very good short-term memory. So if you have a discussion, it can go back in the discussion and remember things. But if you walk away from it for 3 months and come back to it, it's like we've never met. Right? So in long-term relationships, like you mentioned, loneliness. I'm sure at some point that problem will be solved. But now it's not going to remember that. It's not going to remember that. So if you're a child, that thinks you have a relationship with this, it's not really a relationship, and it's going to forget the conversation you had 2 weeks ago, especially if you deleted the thread that you were having with it, right? Because it can't go back and read it.
Or you jump ship, and that locks you into that exact. Oh wait, I have a history now with Claude.
Right.
I can't leave
I can't
Claude.
leave.
Yeah,
Right.
because
Right.
if I'm
There's an
starting
attachment.
new with somebody else, I'd be
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So how do we discern when AI is a tool versus it becomes a crutch in our lives? What are some ways that we can discern that?
Yeah, I think knowing that this is capable of doing things, but don't just stop here. Like say, hey, I had this conversation with this. It said here, and I was at the strip district last night, and there was a men's group happening upstairs, and I just in walking through it, they were talking about this, and I was like, fantastic, and I was like, guys, you are doing a great job because not only are you this, but you're not just alone in your room right out here. You're asking your buddies, hey, I had this encounter. What do you guys think of this?
Right.
So what does your tribe and what does your community force feedback out to hear? Is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? What are you exploring? Find someone with similar interests. I know. Okay, so this goofy story, similar interests.
Sure.
So my feed, I have a Saab car that I drive, right? My news feed, because I've looked, there's so many problems with this car, it gives me, these Saabs are amazing. These cars are great. These are excellent, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like, I've got the coolest car ever. You have also owned a Saab. Tell us your experience with the Saab.
Not as good as yours. Not as good as yours. In fact, I think it's in a junkyard right now because I left it on the side of the road in Breezewood. So,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So my reality is maybe a fantasy of what the value of this vehicle really is because I'm getting this pseudo positive reinforcement from my
Right.
device saying,
Right.
oh, it's totally worth it. Oh, you should totally spend that
Yeah.
$1,000 extra to get this out to go. Whereas you had the reality of situation
Yeah.
being like,
And thanks for bringing that up, John.
This
Good memories.
this is absurd. Why get rid of this? Yeah, why am I keeping this thing alive?
yeah, for
So
sure.
that I think that's a good
That's a
example
good
of
one,
like,
yeah.
you talk to people who are that other reality. You can't just be.
Yeah.
Do you have any
Locked in.
more input, Greg? How we discern?
Thinking about, I think it's a matter of trust. It's like we should never fully trust it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the AI is always going to be biased in some way,
Yeah.
right? And even though data scientists and the people who develop these things really work hard, it's only as good as the data it's trained on. And if there's bias in the data, there's going to be bias in the output. There's just no, you have to realize that. The other thing we need to understand is when I mentioned that we're loading data into it, like a lot of data, it's not really understanding that word for word. It's really understanding gist and relationships and patterns.
Okay.
So there's this concept with LLMs called hallucinations. And that's basically, it's not really lying. It probably thinks that these patterns exist when they don't.
Yeah.
But it's giving you false information, so you shouldn't fully trust it. It's sort of like if you were to, watch a movie on Netflix and you come in the next day at work and you can remember basic plot lines and the overall story, but you're not going to remember every character and what everybody said.
Right.
So, and that's sort of how these systems work.
Okay.
And there's compression that happens, and that's what causes the gist to happen. And depending on the size of the model, it's how much it hallucinates, right?
Yeah.
So smaller models hallucinate more than larger models because
Right.
they have more parameters in them to build more patterns, basically. So it's important, like one, not to fully trust it.
Right.
When I use generative AI, there are generative AIs that cite their work. So
Interesting.
when you ask it a question, not only will it give you an answer, but it'll also give you the citations. It's like, here's where all this information came from.
Right.
Which is awesome,
Yeah.
right? Because then you can go read it and
Yeah.
you're like, okay, yeah.
Wait a minute, this is something
next
slanted
step,
out
not
to
just-
here.
yeah.
So I think, as people become more familiar with it, they're going to put more trust into it. And I would be cautious.
Right.
Just be cautious, right?
Speaking of, I do have children, and we're always thinking about ways we can protect them. And one is just kind of teaching them about AI and
Right.
technology. Are there any other protections that we have now, or that you think we should have when it comes to AI?
Protections, we should have them. we should have a lot more protection, especially around kids, because they don't understand the complexity of these things, and it's very easy to be caught up when you download an app and, oh, this thing's talking to me. Oh, it has the same interests as I. Well, yeah, of course it does, because it's trying to make you happy. So there should be, and I think we probably, before we got on camera, we talked about, I think there needs to be some sensible regulation, and I think we as a society need to come say, it's like, hey, this has some very good use cases, and it could potentially make our lives better, remove some toil. Actually, in some sense, it might free us up a little bit from work because it's doing some of the work for us to have more personal relationships, right? Because we're so, I think in the video we watched, it's like, we're so busy working all the time, we never have free time to have those personal relationships or meet at the church or do those things. So it has a potential to free us up from that so we can have more personal relationships, but it also, there's some, we need to be cautious, especially around young people, because, it's hard for them to distinguish between simulation and reality.
And what's there? And I can think
Sorry,
of,
that was long.
No, that was great.
That was great.
Super
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
I can think of my own girls playing. They're super big into the dress to impress Roblox thing right now, and that the whole point of that game is like they give you a topic, you dress up as that character and go pick it out, and then you get rated on whether or not your clothes fit right out to there.
Right.
And all of the clothes that your little model is wearing, my children would never be allowed to wear any of those clothes. But then you're like, well, wait a minute, what is this teaching them over time? This is what it means to be popular. This is what it looks like to be. This is what this. If you're gonna go to a concert, you're supposed to look like this.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, this is odd. Like, what is this machine teaching my own kid that's different than my family value?
Exactly, and those apps you download, they're basing those apps off of models like ChatGPT because to build these things, it's insanely expensive.
Gigantic amount.
Yeah, a lot of computing power. Yeah. But what happens is these big companies build these models, and then you can download a smaller version of that. These are some of them are open source, so you can download them and use them on your computer. Yeah. And then you can fine tune them. And the process of fine tuning is sort of, think of it like training a model is sort of like when you go from K through 12, right? You're learning a lot of general knowledge. And then you go to college and then you specialize, right? So that fine tuning is that specialization. And you don't know who's building the specialization, where they're steering the model, how they're training it. So while some of these models are probably based on people doing really good work and really trying to remove bias, depending on the app and depending on what they're using and how they're building it, they could be putting bias back into the equation.
Around. Here's where we want to steer these people.
Yeah, so that's why if people ask me, I usually steer them towards, ChatGPT, Claude, Gronk is another really good one. The most common models that people have a lot of effort into making them good. Google's another, Gemini's another really good one. But I concern myself with these like, hey, AI friend, or you see a lot of that. You look at AI on your phone, it's like, blah. It's like, I hate that. I really do, because I'm concerned like you are. It's like, what path are these taking my child down or what have you?
Well, I think it's really important to bring it back to where we get our hope from and where we can feel security, and that is in the Word and with God. And I think that the encouragement is if you are feeling lonely, and while these tools are here to help,
absolutely,
that it is the face-to-face and it is being back in Scripture. Like I said back in Genesis, we were created to be in relationship and to be in the Word, even if you are struggling with loneliness.
For sure.
What are some ways that you think the church can help with?
Yeah, I think just being really clear that, like with that life group thing that I ran into at the scripture school last night, like we were chatting, we were like, what is the requirement for someone to join this group? They have to have a pulse and they want to be willing to show up. So you're like, I think making the community of the church super accessible and being, hopefully we at Orchard Hill do a good job of saying like, no, really, there's open groups, more than happy to bring you in. And it's not like you need to know, I've got a master's degree in theology from this giant school. Now we can let you in. No, so I think that level of community, and then at the church as well, we try to build events that are friendly to invite your neighbors and friends who you're like, okay, we've been going to this church for decades, but new person moved in down the street. Hey, come to the family fest, come to the car show. That's an easy invite. So I think that's one kind of solution that I think we're trying to be intentional about. That isn't just hey, get this info. Oh, you're interested in learning about dating?
Yeah.
Look online at what our pastor said. No.
Right.
Join this group.
Right.
Get these people. Get information.
Yeah.
Talk to real people.
I do. I think we have a good balance of it to
Yeah.
speak to, because we do have things that we can point them to a website.
Yeah.
Like I have some friends that aren't in the area, and so inviting them to come here is not
Right,
going to be.
never
But
gonna
I said,
happen.
hey, like there's a really good podcast. We'll throw it out
Right.
there. We talked about that.
Yeah.
And so again, the balance of using technology as a tool versus also having the in-person invites
Yeah.
and events. And I think, as I do agree, I'm biased, that Angel does a good job of the balance.
Yeah, and it can be a great tool for you guys to help you build copy.
Yeah.
Maybe you couldn't build it as fast if you were using, just human innovation.
Yeah.
Helps you build things faster. It can definitely help with invites and reaching out to people. I think it's a great study tool too. Hopefully this isn't too controversial, but I listen to podcasts, I listen to messages online.
Yeah.
And I read a message on interlapsarianism versus superlapsarianism.
Right.
I'm like, I
Where
don't
in the
understand
world?
this.
Right. Yeah.
So I immediately went,
Yeah.
I used this IA called Perplexity, and I was like, please explain to me this like I'm a 5-year-old. Right? And it did a really good job, and I did finally understand it. So it's also a great study tool, if you're a Christian. It's that trust level. It's like you have to understand that it may get things wrong. So,
Yeah.
don't trust it fully, but it can be a really great study tool as well.
I agree.
So you shouldn't totally fear it. But yeah, I mean, it has a lot of good potential. And I think short-term loneliness, like for maybe people who are in remote areas or potentially like elderly where they don't get to see their family as much, it could be a good tool for them short-term, but I don't think it's a good term long. It's not a long-term solution.
Right.
Maybe a decent short-term solution. And there's some evidence of that, but not long-term.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a long-term replacement for human interaction.
Yeah, if you're like a 24-year-old that just moved to a new city,
Yeah.
that had your job, you moved because you don't know anybody in the room. Yeah, great, awesome. Jump online, ask them where the things are, where they're. But then find those communities, like find your tribe. Use that tool to become. Don't let that tool that allowed you to find that community become your community.
Right.
That is not it.
That's
not where it
excellent
is.
point. Well, do you have any final thoughts, either of you, on this topic or anything?
No, I think it's going to be interesting to see where this goes in 5-10 years. And I was almost thinking like, okay, right now we're kind of like, oh, AI, that's kind of a scary term, And, early 80s, it was like the microwave oven. This is scary. I'm not going to put that in my house. There's radiation going on. My kids are going to have 5 arms and 17 eyeballs and no way. And now we're like, are you serious? Like it's a microwave oven. Like there's no threat to whatever. But so maybe that's where we are now.
Yeah.
This is the fear of the unknown, and there's not enough history of humanity interacting with this that we don't know just what it's going to do, what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. There's no need to fear it. It's just understanding. We need to understand it and know when it's appropriate, when it's not. And the only final thought that I have, and I'm only bringing it up because I listened to a really good John Piper podcast on this, and I thought he nailed it perfectly, is, because of what I do, I use generative AI a lot, mostly because I have to demonstrate it. But it's important for us to know we shouldn't lose ourselves in it, meaning that, and his point was like, I don't want to hear a sermon from generative AI. You know what I mean? There's a personal connection we have with God. There's prayer. He talks to us, a pastor. So when I expect like a pastor that I listen to, he might use it for research, but his thoughts and ideas are his own, right? And I think that extends out into the business world as well. It's like, and kids who go to school, right? It's very easy to write a paper and claim it's yours when it's not.
Yeah.
It's very easy to present yourself in an interview with knowledge that you don't have because you have a chatbot there.
Yeah.
It's very easy to maybe write a white paper or a blog post that you have no business writing. You just, right? So John called it wicked. I don't know if I'd go there, but it is a form of lying. So we should be careful with that, right?
Yeah.
Always use it in the appropriate means and be careful not to present yourself
Yeah,
in a way
misrepresentation.
misrepresent
Yes.
yourself. Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. So sorry, but I think that's important to mention too.
absolutely.
It's good for people to know. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and then think about. So
Yeah, cool.
Well, guys, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming and you're giving us your expertise and
thanks.
your personal input there. And it's been a great episode. Guys, if you like what you heard here, there is more. You can go to Orchard Hill Plus, and we hope to see you soon.